everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Jeff, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Good, good. Please introduce yourself and the name of your business.
My name is Jeffrey Simon. The business is RepHunter.
Awesome, awesome. We so look forward to learning more about RepHunter, but before that, we want to learn a little bit more about Jeffrey. So we understand that time is one of our most valuable resources. So let's jump into it and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, starting way back at the beginning of a career, college and all that kind of stuff, I was a techie. I was always interested in science and technology, and that got into pretty heavy into math and eventually into computer science. And I always had kind of a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit behind it, thinking that I'm going to do something with this. But so that developed, and I eventually went through a lot of different things with some of the largest companies. I worked for a lot of the Dow 30 companies. I had worked at IBM, American Express. I had some of these career positions. I had some experience in nonprofits. And what happened was that I eventually evolved it into consulting, because the path forward as an employee was not as attractive at that time as what you could do as a consultant. You were basically really able to scale up your income much better as a consultant. So started working as an independent consultant for lots of different clients, and that was good. But eventually I was really looking for something. I'd always, you look at the internet and you say, here's somebody who's got a new idea. All the big names of today, your Amazons and even SpaceX and companies like that. There's something where somebody had some kind of different idea. So I was always looking for something that nobody was doing yet. So I was working as this consultant, and I was recruited into a company that hadn't even launched yet. It was barely launched, and what they were looking to me for was, at that time, financial, because I started a career in technology, but due to some companies I was working in, I kind of was diverted into accounting and finance. So I went through a career, and I eventually became, head of accounting, and I became eventually a CFO. So I had a career track in finance. I developed a career track in finance, kind of superimposed on top of a career track in technology. So I had what I later discovered was pretty rare. It's pretty rare to have somebody who had been a CFO and a CIO. And I had both of those. I was like in a CIO position at one of the units of GE Capital. So I really had a dual career track in finance and accounting and in technology. So back to the back to the story of getting recruited in. I got recruited in to a company that wanted me to raise funds. They said, we need to go to the market, and we need capital. We need to bring our idea. So unfortunately for us, the timing could not have been worse. This was like the dot-com bubble had just burst. And here we are, another dot-com coming along saying, yeah, we want to raise money. And we went everywhere. I had done some fundraising before, so I had some experience, but the doors were pretty much closed at the burst of the dot-com. So what we decided was at that point, we went with the business plan and to the venture capitalists and angels and all that. We did all that. And we said, let's just launch this thing. I'll take off my finance hat and put back my technologist hat, and we'll create the thing internally based on the fact that we could do it. We could just create it, internal funding and internal technology. So we did that. Now, I had said earlier, I'd always been, why was I willing to get recruited into a business after being a consultant at, pretty high billing rates?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why was because when I saw this business, I said, there's nothing, this is like 2000, 2001. There's nothing out there in the market doing what this company's doing. And this was a big aha moment. You would say, as an entrepreneur and somebody who's going to burn the ship, you would say, if we're going to burn the ship, this is a big risk, but you're stepping into something that's uncharted territory. There's no competition that we knew of at the time. And, so it looked like a really good opportunity. So that's where we started getting going, internal funding and just creating the platform. And that was in the early days when we're trying to create the platform and we don't really know what we're doing. We don't have a business model. We're a little bit floundering around trying to create that business model. So the question is, this is the company that is now called RepHunter. And what is RepHunter? And what does RepHunter do? And what is that opportunity that at the time did not appear to be available?
Yeah. Well, we're going to learn a little bit more about RepHunter, but I want to take a step back based off of some stuff you shared. You said that when you were growing up, you were a early techie, and then you also shared that you love to build things that aren't there. Did you have early experience, like family members or an experience around engineers that made you lean towards that? What made you fall towards the techie side and want to be creative like that?
Well, it might have been, I would read a lot. I would read magazines. I was a big phase where I was looking at car magazines. I was totally into all of that. But then I got into electronics, like Popular Science, Popular Electronics, magazines of that type. And I started getting into electronics. And one of the things that is your question about building things that aren't there, which was, it wasn't that impressive to me, but it was very impressive to my parents and everybody I knew. For a ninth grade science fair, I decided I was going to build a computer.
Okay.
So I built a computer, and I was in the science fair, and I won like a first prize for it, and it was really not really what you would call a computer. It was a counter. It had 5 binary digits, so it could count up to 32, which is what binary 5 digits is. And you would, every time you would press the button, it would add 1, and the lights, there were flashing lights showing like what the state of each, they're called flip-flops. There was 5 flip-flops. They had lights on them, and I built this thing just from parts. It was an article and a diagram in Popular Electronics. I think that's the magazine it was from. I took my dad to the store. We went to Radio Shack. We bought transistors and circuit boards and resistors, and I wired this thing up because I had done some soldering iron stuff before. I built some kits. I had, Heath kit, electronics, stuff like that. Don't want to probably get into that too deeply, but a hobby, music and building your own equipment. And so we built this thing up out of parts that were just bought at, actually, it wasn't Radio Shack, it was a local store in the Minneapolis area that would not be known, but it was a uh, Shack Electronics, it was called. Uh, and due to a um, interesting juxtaposition, my father was a landlord for a company that was called at the time Control Data. And
Okay.
Control Data was one of the early computer manufacturers.
Mm.
We were the landlord. We I went in with my little computer. It was made in a refrigerator box, a clear plastic box. I still have it. A clear plastic box. It had a train transformer for a power supply,
Hmm.
but it had these transistors and that were purchased retail transistors. They took it into Control Data and they put it on the bench and they tested my flip flops and they said, yours, they were, it kind of blew them away. I mean, it wasn't anything I did. I just saw the diagrams, the parts list, how to build it, bought the parts, and they put it on their oscilloscope to measure the timing. And they said, this thing is flipping at, I don't know what it was, but it was probably microseconds at the time.
Hmm.
And they said, this is really impressive, that a ninth grade kid just built this thing and it had circuits that would, act like computer circuits. So it was very impressive. And it was a thing in my past where I built a computer, but it was really just a 5-digit counter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you said 5-digit counter, but obviously when you talk and took it to a professional, they were very impressed with it. I truly do appreciate you sharing that story because it is interesting, of the origin of people and how they got to where they are, and who knew you as a ninth grader, 13, 14, 15 years old, was just going to get off into that particular start. So I always, like to get a little bit of background so the people understand how you got to where you are. And you said it was getting closer to 2001 and you were already a successful consultant, like you said, getting a decent pay rate for those skills that you possess, but you saw the opportunity for something that was new. Now, I always ask the question, was there an event that happened that made you say, you know what, I'm going to get out of this consulting because I see a bright future in there? Was there an event that happened that made you burn the ship and go all in on RepHunter?
I think there might be something of value to relate here. I had been a consultant, but the very last thing I did before RepHunter was I actually went into an employment position,
Mm-hmm.
and the that was an employment position with uh, General Electric, and I was brought in to be, in effect, the CIO of a new division that they were trying to create. It was trying to get born with inside an actual GE division, and what happened was, in effect, after a struggle of a couple of years, they basically pulled the plug on that little startup. They said this little startup, which had hopes of becoming a whole division, uh, they really pulled the plug on it, and they said we're not going to go anywhere with this. We don't need a CIO,
Mm-hmm.
and it became kind of an unsatisfactory relationship. It wasn't working for them, it wasn't working for me, and it was kind of like, um, you might call it a burnout situation that it ended up as. And that was kind of the segue that led into, well, I can just go back to doing consulting again. I can do some, a few little contracts here and there, a few little clients. But then that's when I got recruited. It was just chance, connect with somebody, go meet with them, and hear their ideas. And and I'm thinking, kind of under the covers, I'm thinking, wow, nobody is doing this. And and that's where we got the start of RepHunter,
Nice.
where RepHunter is going to do something that's, you know, it's a niche. Who knows what it's going to be, but nobody's doing it. So let's you know, I'm thinking, whoa, this is something I'm going to put some time and energy into. And so part of the thing that happened was this, what you might call burnout, and the other part was struggling with the fundraising and not being able to do it, and then deciding we're just going to launch. We'll just create the platform, and we start struggling on a daily basis with what is the right business model for this business, which did not jump off the shelf at us. It definitely took some effort to get to the right business model that then took off.
Yes. Now, what are you guys doing? What is that cutting edge thing that was not out there and you guys were about to do it? What is that thing? Tell us
Yeah,
all about
yeah,
RepHunter and what you guys do.
right. At the time, nobody was doing it that we could tell. And now there's lots of people. People jumped in and they pretty much copied our business model once we figured out what it was.
Hmm.
Uh, the idea is that there is an there is a sales mechanism or channel or uh, entire industry of sales that is, for simplicity, we just call it the independent sales rep channel. Now, people say, well, what's an independent sales rep? Um, they don't really, some people know what that is, some people don't. So it's kind of like the old school traveling salesman that would drive around in his car and call on his buyers and and then bring samples and they would call that a manufacturer's rep. A manufacturer's rep would call on his customers and bring in the product and generate business. Um, Another interesting connection, one of my very earliest exposures, I had exposure to the manufacturer's rep channel because my father was functioning as, he was running a company, but he was functioning as a buyer. So every day he would have sales reps come into his office and do whatever they did. I was too young to know what they were doing really,
Hmm.
but then we would go to lunch. So every day, in the summer when school's out, go to lunch, go to work with my dad and go to lunch with the reps because the reps would take us out to lunch. So we'd go to all these places with reps. So I was kind of in this opportunity to be exposed to what repping is. And nowadays, it's expanded way beyond the concept of a manufacturer's rep because they're not all manufacturers. So, um, to explain to somebody, to the viewer, what is this going on? What is this opportunity? What is a manufacturer's rep, and how does RepHunter function? What added value is there in RepHunter? And we use an analogy to explain this. People say, well, what do you do? Well, I have an internet business, and it's like a dating site. And usually, when you say that, some people will go, "Whoa!" They all light up. Oh, a dating site.
Hmm.
And then you immediately say, once you get their attention, because now you've got their attention. Once you have their attention, you say, and the dates are between manufacturers and manufacturers reps. And then they go, oh, you've deflated their balloon because most half of the people won't know what you're talking about. They don't
Hmm.
know what a manufacturer's rep is, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's not really a dating site, but it is in the sense of it's a matching service. It has that aspect of the dating. It's a matching service between a company who needs an independent rep. They need independent representation and the independent rep. So the key thing that we found, the aha moment that I mentioned, was there's nobody out there doing that. Nobody is matching there's no matching service for companies needing sales representation and the independent reps. And the 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 one who recruited me in was, had experience as a rep, and his idea was to create an online service to help reps get new lines, new product lines and service lines to represent.
Hmm.
So the idea is he's serving his own requirement of his need. There's a pain point, a need. How do I get new lines? Well, let's go online and do a matching service for companies and reps. And, there was nothing out there at that time. So this was a great opportunity. Now, it might be worth saying, well, what's the deal with a manufacturer's rep? Or an independent sales rep? The deal is, let's say you're a company and you're just a startup and you've got some great idea for some new thing. Well, you've got your idea. You may have some ideas how to manufacture it, but you're not really at the market yet. You're not really ready for the market. And not only that, you're not really ready to be a business, because how are you going to sell it? Well, we haven't really thought about the sales. But we've got the ability to create this great product. And then they say, well, okay, now it's time to think about the sales. So one option is create a sales department. So you hire a sales manager, like a national sales manager, and the national sales manager will staff your department. And, we use a number 150,000 as just kind of an average cost of a sales manager, but it could go to 250,000 with burden, overhead, different things.
Hmm.
So you've got a fixed cost now to hire some sales manager, or maybe several managers, and they're going to hire staff. And, in the first year, your budget could go up $500,000 to $1 million, and you have no sales. It's going to take them a while to get sales. So in order to follow a business plan of that type, you're going to have serious funding. And that's a whole different issue. So generally what people do is they say, well, what's an alternative to that? Well, an alternative to hiring your own in-house sales is use independent sales reps. And what that means is, instead of in-house sales, you outsource. In effect, you're outsourcing the sales function. You don't have that 250,000 to $1 million cost. Your cost is, in effect, zero or close to zero, because they don't get paid unless they sell. They're paid 100% commission. So the startup that says, I've got this great idea, or an established company that says, we want to move into a new region or a new product line, does not have to take the risk of the built-in cost of an in-house sales. So you outsource the sales, you talk to the independent rep. The independent rep says, yeah, I'm already selling on Amazon, I'm selling to Target, I'm selling at Walmart, and I see the buyers all the time. I can take your product in when I go in next week. I have credibility because I'm already established, and I can get your product in to this, opportunity. Now, that is a big oversimplification. That is glossing over all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But essentially, that's the idea. The idea is, let's use an independent rep to reduce the risk and to get our project, our company launched.
Now, you were sharing that this is a great opportunity for those smaller businesses that are bringing their product to market, or those larger companies that are trying to create something in what's already established. How were you able to find those smaller businesses to get the business going? Now you have a reputation, been doing it for 25 years. I understand that part, but it's a new business you have, and there's new businesses you're looking to connect with. How did you guys go about building it in the early stages?
Well, that is a definite bootstrapping type of question. How do you bootstrap yourself into position. Now, a company starting today would have lots of different tools that we didn't have, but they would be competing against our basic the basic barrier to entry they have is our very substantial presence, reputation, our membership of independent reps. So we were actually using some techniques that I don't know that they would really work in today's market, but in the time when there's nobody out there, we were using some other job platforms basically to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a platform we used in the beginning called Hot Jobs. Hot Jobs is no longer with us. It's been absorbed into uh, several levels of other. I think it's ultimately went into Yahoo, and then I think it's part of Microsoft now at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
it's buried.
Gotcha.
It's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that um, once you have a little bit of market presence, you can leverage that into word of mouth. In the beginning, there was no word of mouth because you had to bootstrap yourself up by getting, a couple thousand members. And then at that point, you can start generating your own word of mouth and reputation. It was very important for us to get in fairly early on in the online search engines. Um, there were not in 2001. There really were not any search engines. the The main thing that you had at that point was the Yahoo type service, which was a directory, and it was kind of like a search engine,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't like what turned. They didn't really have the massive market position that Google has now developed. Um, it was really Yahoo in the beginning. We started with Yahoo, and Yahoo, um, sort of history, computer history. If you were remember back in those days, you would go to Yahoo, and you would it was a directory, so you could drill down by categories.
Mm-hmm.
But then they added the search function and searching, and then down in the bottom of the web page there was a tiny little slug that said powered by Google. And but Google didn't have its own website. It was just Yahoo powered by Google. And I may not have the timing and the historical dates exactly right,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually Google became the thing, the tail wagging the dog, and it kind of took over. In those days there were lots of different search engines, Alta Vista and other types of search engines, but Google basically figured out how to actually do it right. And so we actually started um, advertising on the pay per click on Google. This they call it sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
When you do a Google search, you see sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's called pay per click. The I think we first started Google in 2002, uh, and as they say, the rest is history. Because it really started. We had enough credibility so that we were. Um, I don't really think it was 2002, but I think either 2003 or 2004, we were already like the number one position on Google.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would search, find independent sales rep, RepHunter's the first position. So we've had very high placement since the very beginning, and that's kind of a barrier to entry. How do you get and a typical search right now, we would be high in the sponsored ads, we would be high in the organic,
Mm-hmm.
and we're high in the AI. The AI section, mentions RepHunter as one of the first choices typically. So that's uh, the barrier to entry right now is how do you get on the first page of Google, that type of thing. And we've enjoyed having had that um, advantage since those very early years. and back in those years, nobody really knew, what independent reps were, or the mass market was not really aware of it. But over time, the marketplace has attracted lots of competition. So there are lots of services that come and go, that basically are competing head on with us. Um, in the early days, the head on competitors, it's interesting because we didn't really consider them to be competitors. They're the job boards,
Mhm.
because one of the things you'd say, well, isn't that, what's the difference between what RepHunter does, matching independent reps, and a standard job board? A standard job board in those days would have been, there was one called Headhunter, there was Monster, which still exists, and um, some other, Career Builder, some of those. But actually, before that, there were some I'm not even thinking of. There were other job boards. Um, Hot Jobs, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the first job boards. Um, the problem for people who are looking for independent reps, you can go to a job board, but the problem is you'll typically be inundated with resumes of job seekers. And even though they do, you know, have qualification gates you have to go through, you still get a lot of resumes and a lot of job seekers. So RepHunter developed its business model based in part on those parameters. How do we deliver the matching service to the marketplace that meets the requirements of people? We have a very large database, and 100% of them or let's say 0% are job seekers. They're not people who are going to just say, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for a career, a salary, a position. They're instead independent reps, which are businesses. An independent rep is a business, not an employee. So as a business, they're going to walk and talk differently. They're going to act differently. And the method of reaching them is different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, as you mentioned, if you go that other route and you start to get after those job seekers, then that's when you got to have that capital raised and ready because it's going to be an extended amount of time before the sales happen. Therefore, having the independent, an already established business helps you to skip that. I definitely appreciate you sharing what it is that you do, those differentiators, and especially those humble beginnings about how you grew the business. And Jeff, I'm confident that over your time of going to school, getting educated, being an independent consultant, and working with RepHunter, you have acquired and nurtured a bunch of business skills that have helped you to be successful. Do you mind sharing with the audience that's watching now a couple of those business skills that maybe they can add to their mix and try to strive toward that same success?
Right. What the challenge in that kind of a question is, we don't want to reveal our secret sauce, but we do want to share
Mm-hmm.
with some general
Yes.
uh, things that can benefit people. And uh, looking at that, you'd say, well, what are some of the things that created a platform, us to be successful in our market niche? Um, one of the one of the key things that we had from almost the beginning was a very high level of touch or warm connection with our members. Um, I would say from day one on our website, we had our phone number prominently posted, whereas there was a small handful of competitors that we actually call competitors because they're directly head on, they're matching reps and companies,
Mm-hmm.
which we do. We didn't consider the job boards a competitor because even though they're a competitor in the keyword space, you'll search on the same keywords. They're not doing the same service that we provide. So we didn't consider them a competitor. But the competitors that were there, none of them had their phone number. I mean, you would have to send them an email, and we heard from people that it would take maybe a week or two for them to get back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was not a warm connection. And, it's like, hey, let's launch a website. Let's do what they're doing. Let's try to match companies and reps. And, what do we provide? Well, let's give them an email address if they need support. Tech support is an email. So we kind of forced the market. The significant competitors eventually had to put their phone number on because in order to compete with what we were doing. So one of the things we did is it's easy to contact us. We actually reach out to new members as part of our ongoing process where we will connect with people and explain. It's not rocket science, but it does need a little explanation
Mm-hmm.
as to how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So a typical support call is, how does it work? What's the big picture? And we basically then go into how you would approach and use the service. So we've found that and feedback from our membership and our base has always reinforced that they value. Hey, I just wanted to see if you were a real company. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to see if someone would answer the phone, and it definitely gives them a feeling when we answer the phone and we can understand their pain and help them through what they need, whether it's use of the website or understanding the rep channel or reps understanding what it takes to go into business as a rep, because we do also help both sides. We help the companies, we help the reps. So that warm touch has been one of our secrets, and it's not a secret because you go to our website and our phone number is right there, and we have other ways to contact us that are the typical ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I definitely appreciate you sharing that part because, like I said, we would never ask you to give away all of that juice about how you got there. But you share something that is very important as you were talking about something you guys did differently. You had an approach of taking care of your people, which your people then took care of the business, and then the business then took care of you. So I like how you laid that out to share. If you're taking care of your people, then they'll take care of the business and everything should be good. So I definitely appreciate you highlighting that because that is very important for someone to know, especially for someone has been doing business for over 2 decades. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. So I won't ask you too many more of those secrets. I want you to keep it so RepHunter can continue to grow. And that helps with my transition also. You've shared a lot about your journey. You've talked about the business and you gave one of those key principles of business success that have helped you. But now I want to take a little bit of time and talk about Jeff. So let's just say that you are continuing to match up these independent sales people and these businesses that are taking things to the market. Time and money is not an issue at all. What is it that Jeff would do with his time?
well, I don't know if you ever get to the point where time and money are not an issue. They're always an issue in some way. So, are you asking, is the question like, if I wasn't working the quote, the day job, what else would I do?
Yeah,
Is that is
let's
that your
just say
question?
you
Or
have
are you
you got unlimited it's fantasy world time. It's unlimited money and it's
okay?
unlimited
Okay.
time. What would Jeff do with that?
Okay. Um, this gets into a kind of a different way of thinking about it. Um, One of the things inside the business, we're looking to expand in new creative ways. We're always trying to do that. So part of creativity is how do you work the business in new ways of marketing, outreach. That would be things like, hey, podcasts, things like that. And we've just recently, a couple weeks ago, launched our own uh, Rep RepHunter podcast, uh, and we've got 5 episodes in the can, 3 are published, and we're calling it Rep Intel. We're focusing on the rep side. Uh, but let's say, um, you know, time is always a limit, but money, let's say money is not a limit and management of the company is not a limit, which it is, but let's say it wasn't. If I was, I look at how do I look at what I would do, it's almost like if you were retired, what would you do?
Mhm.
Would you sit in the rocking chair on the porch? And for me, no, that could never happen. I've got too much energy and too much motivation. So for me, retirement would be um, basically just changing what I do. What else would I do differently?
Mhm.
So one of the guidelines that we use in the company, kind of a company unspoken motto, is do the right thing. So when an issue comes up with a customer, we and it's hard to decide which way should we go, how should we handle it. We will always say, you want to do the right thing. So what is the right thing for the business, for the customer, and it's a value that we have internally to you know create benefit to everybody. Everybody benefits. So if I was not having to do the right thing in connection with the business, I would probably, look more into uh, becoming an active investor, active trader, that type of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, I had done that in the past in some short episodes with active trading, and I've always liked that kind of a thing of want to get back to it, but uh, the day job hasn't really ever let that fully take over.
Mhm.
So if there was no day job, it probably would come back in. I also would probably get back uh, to some interest I have in music, which has been on the uh, background forever. I've got a bunch of musical instruments that I never pick up
Mhm.
and never play with them. I would probably get back into that. I have some experience with keyboards and guitars of various types. So I
That's
would probably want to do that kind of stuff if I wasn't, plugged in as much as I am.
I'm gonna say, Jeff, you got to do me a favor. You got to pick up whatever instrument that is. If it's not this weekend,
Yeah.
before the year is out, and just touch a key just for me. Just go
Okay.
back and touch a key or strum a little
Yeah.
bit before
Sounds
the
like a
year is
plan.
over. Before the year is over. That's the challenge from Roderick to Jeff. Now,
Ah.
now, Jeff, inside of everything that you share, there's magnificent things about your story, your journey, your business, even in some of those tips and tricks that help you to grow the business. If someone wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you, Jeff?
Well, probably uh, when you say contact
With
with
you about the business. If
with the
someone,
business, yeah,
yes, yes.
uh, that would be our website, which is www.rephunter.net, and RepHunter is REP as in Paul Hunter. So I'm hoping that you'll have that on the screen somewhere at
Oh
some
yeah, oh yeah,
point, but
yeah, yeah. We'll put it. We'll definitely put it in the
something like
description.
that.
Yeah, we'll put it
Yeah,
down there. Mm-hmm.
yeah. RepHunter is the best way to connect. Um, from the website, you can connect, get into our blog, and you can um, not yet, but eventually you'll be able to get into our podcast more easily than you can now. We don't have the podcast gallery up yet,
Mm-hmm.
but that's coming. So those would be probably the best ways to make a connection.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, of course, we appreciate all of our guests for coming on the show. It's not always easy to share those ups, downs, all arounds, but you've done a great job of illustrating that. And we want to honor you by giving you the last word. So, Jeff, why don't you please look into the camera and tell the people something good?
I think I would reiterate, emphasize the concept of do the right thing is at the highest level is really something that is going to make a difference in your ability to be successful at what you want to do, and also get you, get you straight with the universe. You'll really get uh, the flow with the universe. It's like a figure eight flow with the universe, and part of the core of that is doing the right thing and being in tune with that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those wise words and coming on the show with us today.
Thank you, Roderick.
Yes.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome.
My
Awesome.
pleasure.
Awesome. And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.